because we're getting to the topic of immunometabolism, that the set point of our immune system is governed by our total body metabolism, meaning that we want an immune system that's in the Goldilocks zone. We don't want to have an underactive immune system and be at risk for infections, for example, poor wound healing. We don't want to have an overactive immune system such that it reacts against our own system, and we develop autoimmune conditions, which are incredibly prevalent these days. And to recognize that your body's metabolism is governing that set point is very empowering. Therefore, you can balance your immune response by balancing your metabolism.
Collective Insights is a voyage through topics and technologies revolutionizing human well-being. Groundbreaking approaches for a better world and a better life await you. Welcome to Collective Insights.
Hi, I'm Dr. Greg Kelly, VP of Product Development at Qualia. Our podcast often delves into topics related to mental well-being because issues like brain fog, mental exhaustion, and supporting long-term brain health are common concerns. That's why we make Qualia Mind. Our new and improved Qualia Mind formula required thousands of research hours, reviewing hundreds of ingredients until we identified 32 vegan, non-GMO brain nutrients and compounds that together form the ultimate blend for brain health. From focus, memory, mood, the drive to get things done, Qualia Mind supports everything you need to have a thriving mindset. We think you'll notice the brain-nourishing difference fast, and that you'll appreciate its support for healthy brain aging years down the road. To try Qualia Mind risk-free for 100 days, go to qualialife.com/mind and use code MIND for an additional 15% off your order. That's qualialife.com/mind to experience the ultimate blend for brain health. Today, we're honored to welcome Dr. David Perlmutter, a renowned neurologist and best-selling author known for his groundbreaking work in brain health and nutrition. With a focus on cognitive function, aging, and the neuroprotective benefits of lifestyle choices, Dr. Perlmutter empowers individuals to enhance their mental well-being. His insights into mood, memory, and healthy brain function make him a leading voice in the field of neuroscience. Let's dive right in. I'm here today with Dr. Perlmutter, and we're going to talk about the brain. So I think of you as like America's neurologist and one of the foremost experts. So
There you go. Thank you. Glad to be here, Greg.
yeah, so maybe just start off and explain the connection between what we think of as maybe some of the cognitive things the brain does and the mood things it does and how they interact.
Well, at least let's look at both cognition and mood and other psychological things pretty much mechanistically when they go bad. Let's look at, that's what people want to know about. What happens when I start to lose my cognitive function or I develop a mood disorder, I become depressed or whatever it may be. And that's the threat. And interestingly, what makes a good brain go bad in both of those scenarios is exactly the same. And that's important because, in mainstream medicine, there's a tendency to create an anxiety drug, a depression drug, a drug for memory, a drug for this and that, siloing all of these issues to create a single approach to treating them because that can be monetized. Reality is there's an underlying principle here that brain metabolism is underlying all of this stuff and so much more.
Well, one of the things you edited a book, I believe it was called something like The Microbiome
And the brain. That's correct.
And I know a lot of your books, like Brain, like the gut plays a huge role in, how our brain operates. So can you maybe share a bit of that with our audience?
Well, first, let me say it's always a tiny bit surprising when I'm asked that question. You can be sure I'm asked that question always because it's only very recently that the gut and the brain were looked upon as being disparate, as being separate. Throughout history, it's always been very clear that nutrition, that food affects how you feel and affects the entire body, including, believe it or not, the brain. The brain, oddly enough, is actually part of the body. Who knew? It's made from the stuff that you eat that goes through the gut. That's how you build your brain, just like you build your liver and your kidneys. It's made from what you eat. So the idea that we're going to open up a discussion because this notion that the gut and the brain are related is somehow exciting new news is always interesting to me because that's only a very recent phenomenon. The foods we eat are a signal about what's going on in the environment, signal our physiology as to where we are, what is the season, what is food availability, and prepares our entire physiology to be best adapted to the condition in which we find ourselves. And as such, even moment to moment influences the brain and therefore influences your behavior. Let me give you an example. When you eat fruit, it tells your brain that it's the fall and that you need to prepare your entire body for caloric scarcity, that you won't find food. I think that's pretty fascinating. How does it do that? Through a number of mechanisms. That fructose in the ripened fruit, which that's where the name came from, fruit traditionally before it was farmed year in and year out, was mostly ripe in the fall as a signal to our physiology, controlling our behavior, controlling how we foraged, and motivated us to keep looking for sweet things to make us a little bit fatter so we could survive. So that's kind of a gut-brain relationship that not a lot of people talk about. Generally, the relationship is between the microbiome, the bacteria, the viruses, the other organisms, the yeast that live in the gut, and how they are influential in terms of the brain. And they are influential through a number of mechanisms, like the creation of certain products like short-chain fatty acids that can be interpreted in the brain as signaling molecules or even used as fuel. They create B vitamins, which help the brain take care of itself. And I think most importantly, the bacteria in the gut that are a reflection of the food we eat. Let me digress for a moment. It's been said that when a woman is pregnant, she needs to be very careful because now she's eating for two. Well, we're each eating for about 1 trillion. When you think about all of those organisms living within you that are dependent upon your choices in terms of their health. Well, conversely, your health depends on their health, because one of the things those bacteria are doing in your gut right now is keeping the lining of your gut intact. When the lining of your gut is compromised because you didn't eat right, then various things that should stay in the gut make their way through the gut lining. We call that a leaky gut. And that challenges the immune system, and even the brain is affected by that challenge. Even the brain is affected by some of the chemicals that make their way from being in the gut to outside the gut, the challenge to the immune system, and the direct effect of certain chemicals, like something called LPS, can make its way into the brain and can create real problems in terms of changing how the brain is working moment to moment.
Well, when you said earlier, all these different diagnoses would have in common, like the brain's gone bad, like the underlying, and would I be correct that leaky gut is one of those often underlying issues that has been causing inflammation and these LPS and other compounds arriving at the brain, and then the brain being, oh, like this isn't working for me?
Yeah, but in a very real way, the upside to that whole thing is when we become sick, for example, and LPS rises and causes inflammation in the brain, what does it do? It makes us, in a sense, when we're sick, we become depressed. Sickness feeling. We feel sick. We don't want to be with other people. We want to just stay home and stay in bed. That's a good thing for the species. Why? Because we're not spreading that contagious illness, if that's what it is. So we always have to look at both sides to why these things happen. And another bidirectional consideration is, we're talking about the gut-brain connection. People think that's really interesting. Well, what about the brain-gut connection? What about going in the other direction? What about signals from the brain that arise from stress, for example, higher levels of cortisol that actually then change the complexion of the gut bacteria? That also can lead to leakiness of the gut. So in a very real way, there's a lot of merit to the notion of a gut feeling, because there's this bidirectional communication between the gut and the brain and the brain and the gut.
When, in addition to that, they tend to both track together with aging, right? Like, dysbiosis would be a hallmark of aging. We all, or I would think most of our listeners are familiar with. There's certain ways the brain goes bad with aging, which has been, part of your work, dementia and other things.
That's right. And the number one risk factor for Alzheimer's is your age. It's not diabetes. It's not female gender. It's not low level of educational achievement. It's not any of the other metabolic issues. It's age. That's the number one risk factor. It says that when you become 85 years of age, your risk is 50-50. That's worrisome. That's the largest growing segment of the American population right now. And so this becomes then an epidemic. We're looking at 55 million people around the world, about 6.9 million Americans been diagnosed with Alzheimer's, a disease for which there is no meaningful treatment in terms of a pharmaceutical intervention. So when we get our arms around the notion that this is a metabolic problem and the metabolism in the brain reflects the metabolism in your body, then we start to look at all the things people do to improve their body metabolism, like exercise, like eating less refined carbohydrates, like measuring their blood glucose with a continuous glucose monitor, like being careful as to what types of fats they consume. All of these become very relevant when translated to a brain health program as well. And it's exactly the same. There's no difference between a heart healthy diet or an immune healthy diet or a liver healthy diet or a brain healthy diet. It is all the same because we're trying to create a diet that sends to our DNA what it expects to receive. And what our DNA is looking for are those inputs about the environment from our ancestors when the world was a lot different.
Yeah, very different. You mentioned like fruit, we would naturally have eaten a lot in the summer, early fall, sends a signal. Are there certain dietary patterns or changes that you advise or that you follow yourself seasonally?
No, I don't eat seasonally because I would ask myself, what is the season where? And with travel, et cetera, to me, it doesn't make sense. Populations that live in a specific area and did not migrate during their lifetimes developed a rhythm of seasonality, and their microbiomes adapted to that. We don't do that. We change the clocks as you and I will do.
Yeah.
And we move around quite a bit. I hold to some specific broad stroke recommendations for myself in terms of diet. And, we live in a world of personalized medicine where we would want to know exactly what is the makeup of your genome, what are your metabolic parameters, what are your biometrics, et cetera, to recommend a specific diet for you. Great. But I take a more broad-based approach for individuals in terms of recommendation and ask one fundamental question, that is, what dietary genre for you works best to control your blood sugar? You may seem that I'm fixated on blood sugar. You're right, I am. So what works best for your particular blood sugar? And how would you know that? You would wear a continuous glucose monitor, and then we would discuss what you've been eating. Hey, this looks great. Your blood sugar is under terrific control, or maybe not. Maybe you've identified a particular food that tends to spike your blood sugar, and therefore that's something you'd want to avoid. So that's a great tool for personalizing an approach in terms of recommendations.
What a great recommendation.
Yeah.
A lot of issues, cognitive, even joints can almost be metabolic.
Well, not almost.
Yeah,
they are. We're getting to the topic of immunometabolism, that the set point of our immune system is governed by our total body metabolism, meaning that we want an immune system that's in the Goldilocks zone. We don't want to have an underactive immune system and be at risk for infections, for example, poor wound healing. We don't want to have an overactive immune system such that it reacts against our own system. We develop autoimmune conditions, which are incredibly prevalent these days. And to recognize that your body's metabolism is governing that set point is very empowering. Therefore, you can balance your immune response by balancing your metabolism. And to be fair, as it relates back to food, which is a key input for metabolic health, people pretty well know what's right and what's wrong. And, some general recommendations: get a CGM, determine how your blood sugar responds to various foods. But I would say that if you want to try eating right, eat foods that don't have an ingredient label at all. Or if they do have 3 or less ingredients, do that for a month and just see how much better you feel, how your metabolic parameters improve. That's really straightforward. There's no guesswork. Either has 3 ingredients or less, or it has a variety of things you can't even pronounce. Don't eat it. Eat foods that aren't packaged, and if they are, ingredients, 3 or less, and you're going to be doing 95% of the work.
This is a great self-experiment.
Yep.
So I was curious, you mentioned CGM. Is there any other technology that you're intrigued with or using that does have maybe like a brain benefit or something actionable?
My name is James Schmachtenberger, CEO of Qualia, and I want to invite you to participate in the creation of our products. At Qualia, rigorous science is a top priority. That's why we research thousands of clinical studies and even do formal studies on our actual products. But we also rely on and value the feedback from you, our community. Qualia Beta Program is your chance to experience products before they ever go to market and influence the ways that we can make them even better. You'll get to participate in pilot studies to tell us what you do and don't like about products, and even participate in product surveys to influence which products we're focused on making. Think of our beta program as your chance to work hand in hand with our science team, deeply influencing the quality and creative direction of our products. So go to qualialife.com/beta to join our group of health enthusiasts who get to be the first in the world to try our new products and to truly shape the future of the Qualia brand. That's qualialife.com/beta. We hope to collaborate with you soon.
Sure. Well, or empowers you.
Yeah.
And there's a very, very high-tech device that's available now called a tape measure. I find that to be very, very helpful. And in fact, if you don't want to measure your waist circumference, just wear the same belt for a month and see how it fits. But I think keeping an eye on your waist circumference is reasonable. I mean, it's low tech as low tech can be. And yet that's powerful information in terms of where you are, in terms of managing your metabolism. Why does it matter to me? It matters to me because this is exceedingly relevant for your brain's destiny. Where you're going to be in 10 years and 20 years is very much dictated by your metabolic health today. Prior to you losing memory or wondering what the Wi-Fi code is, the grandchildren's names, whatever it may be, knowing your metabolic status today helps you chart that destiny. And I think that's really empowering.
It's one of the things I know that you would know, and I'm sure some of our listeners, is just how many years in advance you could already see some deterioration of the brain.
First thing we see is function.
Yeah.
It's metabolism, which is a function. And these changes are seen 2 to 3 decades prior to the memory loss of executive function, because the brain has reserve. But that's an inexorable decline. We don't really have a quick pharmaceutical fix, despite the fact that at least 3 medications have been approved by the FDA, specifically focused on targeting beta amyloid. Amyloid hypothesis is really being proven to be not the cause of Alzheimer's. The latest literature says it's a metabolic issue, and the accumulation of beta amyloid is a secondary event caused by the metabolic shift in the brain's immune cells. When these cells shift from being friendly to being foe, they increase the levels of amyloid in the brain. They lead to digestion of the synapses connecting one brain neuron to the next, leakiness of the blood-brain barrier, and really initiating a process where neurons, brain cells, undergo pre-programmed cell death. That's because of a metabolic change in these immune cells in the brain over which you and I and everyone listening has control. The metabolic status of your brain reflects the metabolic status of your body. It's why people keep harping on us to exercise more, consider more of a ketogenic diet, nurture your microbiome with good levels of dietary fiber, avoid ultra-processed foods. These are the keys to the kingdom.
Can you maybe touch on the importance of sleep and the lymphatic system for keeping our brain metabolism on track and our brain?
Okay, well, let's get to the lymphatic system secondarily. We'll start with sleep and we'll end up there. So sleep is one of the pillars. Sleep needs to be assessed in terms of its quantity and its quality. So the idea of, well, I slept 8 hours last night. Okay, how many times did you wake up? How much deep sleep did you engage? How much REM sleep, etc.? What was your latency? How long did it take you to fall asleep? All of those things are really valuable, and various wearable device. I use the Oura Ring, but there are many devices out there. Give a pretty good representation as to what's going on. Not 100%, but for an individual, It's not so much what last night's Oura Ring report or other wearable report said, but it's what happens to those parameters over time for that individual. And that's exceedingly valuable. Then you begin to get an understanding as to what different inputs to sleep. What is the effect of exercising in the morning versus the evening, of having alcohol before I slept, of watching TV without blue light blocking glass, whatever it may be, taking melatonin, not taking melatonin, all the potential ideas that you might have in terms of being influential in terms of your sleep. One of the things that sleep regulates in your body is insulin sensitivity. You stay up one night, the next morning, your blood sugar will be higher, your insulin functionality will be diminished. That's bad. That's bad back for your brain. Again, we had our conversation about the fact that the glucose utilization of the brain is, when that fails, that's the earliest thing we see that presages to the development of Alzheimer's. Getting a poor night's, we know that people who don't sleep well have a dramatically increased risk of Alzheimer's. That's why paying attention to why you're not sleeping is really fundamental. You might need a CPAP, a continuous positive airway pressure device, or surgery or something that helps you with your breathing at night, or maybe just a 30 or 50 pound weight loss to offload that belly so that you can sleep better, so you don't have sleep apnea. The next day, again, insulin sensitivity is reduced, inflammation markers are increased, then that worsens insulin sensitivity. That's directly threatening to the brain. And you do that night after night, and then a very interesting thing begins happening. And it creates what we call a feed-forward cycle. Your decision-making ability starts to deteriorate to the lowest common denominator. What does that mean? It means that we have been gifted an area of the brain called the prefrontal cortex, right behind the forehead, that allows us to make really good decisions about ourselves, my decisions that will have an effect on you, that will have an effect on the planet, that are forward thinking, that look to the future in terms of my health, for example. And this is an adult in the room, if you will.
Yeah, I always think of it as it's the part of my brain that allows you to do the hard thing when it's the right thing.
Right.
Now it does more than that, but.
Exactly right. Now, this is in contrast to a more primitive part of the brain called the amygdala that says, I want it now. I don't care if it's bad for me. I want to stay up late. I'm going to eat whatever it is. I don't care if I run the red light because I'm late, and all the things that don't consider it's really self-centered and impulsivity. It's the 5-year-old. So we depend on the prefrontal cortex to top-down control the 5-year-old, the adult in the room. And the way, interestingly, this feeds back to sleep, which is where we were, is because when sleep is not where it needs to be and increases inflammation, it threatens the connection between the ability of the adult in the room to communicate to the child in the room. And then our decision-making is even worse. Then we continue to stay up late and eat the wrong foods and get poor sleep. That becomes a feed-forward cycle, a cycle that culminates really as a brain threat. The other thing that suffers when we don't sleep long enough, especially if we don't get enough deep sleep, is something you mentioned earlier. We're not taking out the garbage, basically, through, as you'd called it, a glymphatic system. That requires us to enter deep sleep. And when we enter deep sleep, then this system is activated, very recently discovered, that helps the brain refine itself in terms of taking out misfolded proteins, accumulation of metabolism, end products of bacterial digestion, a variety of things that have been accumulated within the nerve cell, have been swallowed into things called lysosomes, and then finally purged to an area that they can be reacted upon by the system that you characterized, the glymphatic system, that becomes quite active during deep sleep. So if you want to take out the garbage, which is something your brain needs to do every day, that's why you need to get into deep sleep.
I know I used Oura Ring and other things, and I know really quickly after Greg goes to bed, I plunge into deep sleep, and then almost, I think of it, and this, I did a lot of fish tank when I was growing up. It's almost like a buoy. Then I submerge in it, you pop back up. Your brain will wake up. We're usually not aware of that, but sleep is just such an endlessly fascinating thing.
Yeah. So what were you fishing for with the?
So I grew up near Cape Cod. And,
Okay.
dependent, but bottom fishing, it always would be cod.
Yeah.
Bass and mackerel will fry, bluefish when they ran. So I had an uncle that was super into fishing.
There you go.
Yep. And then we did a little lobstering, but
Up there.
yeah, inner side of Cape Cod is Gulf of Maine.
Yeah.
Outer side is much warmer.
With traps, or you would dive for them?
Both.
Nice.
My brother and I, our traps would usually be cut by the professional.
Commercial. Yeah, it's called a courtesy pull.
Yeah.
We see that in British Columbia. Yeah.
Okay. But yeah, it was a great way to grow up right on the coast. One thing, so I'm sure many of our listeners know you're a multi-time New York Times bestselling author. I was curious if any of the stories or testimonies from people that encountered you through your book that stand out in terms of wow, this person had just almost an amazing.
I have to say that at any venue like where we are right now, there are always people, sometimes 6, 8, 10, who indicate that whatever the disease process was remarkably improved, if not cured, by things that I wrote about 15 years ago in books like Grain Brain and Brain Maker, which was a book I wrote about the microbiome, and I talked about that. And now these things are being really highly validated. I just, for the fun of it, asked ChatGPT recently, how have the ideas expressed by Dr. David Perlmutter in Grain Brain stood the test of time? And it was a great report saying, now, mainstream medicine is embracing the importance of regulating blood sugar, number one, and the role of metabolic health in terms of the brain's destiny. They didn't use that word. That's my language. But across the board, it was really nice to be validated like that.
Well, I love that concept of the brain's destiny.
Yeah. Well, we are the architects of that destiny.
I tend to think of things in terms of investment, financial investment, health investment. But if I want to be financially healthy when I get to a certain point, I had to invest earlier. And a lot of your work is about people investing in their health earlier so that their older years, their brain, their destiny is one that they'll be comfortable when they arrive.
Yeah. And really, what good is it to have your body be intact and you physically can accomplish tasks, but your mind is no longer for the ride? Yep. That's not going to be fun.
No, not at all. So last thing is I was curious if you could maybe, with all of your knowledge and the things that you're still pursuing, if there is maybe a couple tips you could leave our listeners or...
Let me leave them with one tip.
Sure.
And that is that we have been convinced basically that we should live our lives however we choose in terms of the food we eat whatever you want, stay up late, don't exercise, just do what's comfortable, do what you want to do, because modern medicine will be here to fix your problem. Watch TV in the evening, you see ad after ad for monoclonal antibody drugs to fix everything you can imagine. And the reality is that our ability to actually fix things is quite limited, especially as it relates to Alzheimer's disease, that we need to take agency. And that the most important message that I can give to your viewers is that each and every one of us is steering that boat. And that it's not up to modern medicine to develop a wonder drug. We've got to be, really proactive as opposed to reactive. We got to, John Kennedy said the time to fix the roof is when the sun is shining. We've got to make those changes right now, today, for each and every one of your viewers who's watching us, to rein in metabolism and pave the way for better brain health.
Thank you. Thank you so much for all you've done to advance our knowledge in these areas over quite an amount of time. I think I first became aware of you when I graduated naturopathic school.
Wow.
In 96. You were already,
Where did you go to naturopathic school?
It was called Southwest College.
Oh, yeah.
And I guess the first class then.
Wow.
And
you're still first class.
Yeah, just wanted to personally thank you for everything you've contributed.
I'm happy to help. Thank you.
This podcast is for informational purposes only. The podcast is not intended as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. You should not use the information on the podcast for diagnosing or treating a health problem or disease, or prescribing any medication or other treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider before taking any medication or nutritional, herbal, or homeopathic supplement, and with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard on this or any other podcast. Reliance on the podcast is solely at your own risk. Information provided on the podcast does not create a doctor-patient relationship between you and any of the health professionals affiliated with our podcast. Information and statements regarding dietary supplements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration and are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. Opinions of guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. This podcast does not make any representations or warranties about guest qualifications or credibility. Individuals on this podcast may have a direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to therein. If you think you have a medical problem, consult a licensed physician.